Hello everyone and welcome. It is high time I tackle the Space Marine from the Getting Started with Warhammer magazine. Yes! And as it was decided, and since I'm a Space Wolves fan, it had to be a Space Wolf. First is a base coat of RUSS Grey. Base coating for me is pretty annoying and pretty boring. Don't really like how the coverage comes out after one coat, especially since this is a layer paint. So I definitely will do a second coat, but I really can't wait to get an airbrush. I'm really hoping that this will solve this issue and make it a lot more fun to actually base coat my models. As the model was kept in several parts, these needed to be base coated separately. Now, the problem with doing this and painting separate parts is that when I assemble them, the colors will be damaged. Now, ideally there should be an optimal solution to be able to reach every nook and cranny. I wanted to test it out, and this is especially for this push fit model. I wanted to try and assemble it after it was painted, and this will definitely not be an option with other models which are super glue. But it's really easy to get into every position with this particular model. But I had to be very careful when assembling it to not damage the paint. As I said, a second coat is definitely needed. Now I base every single part of my model. For example, I did not paint over the seal with the scroll. This is because I knew that it was going to be a very light color and I didn't want it to have that gray background for parchment. And the same is true for the sword and the bolter arm. I see no point in putting gray paint over the bolter, which is going to be painted black, and lead pilcher, which have great coverage, and that gray will not be seen, especially if I'm doing it with a brush and I have very good control over it. I don't know what's going to happen when I have an airbrush, but I'll probably not focus on those areas either. once the base coat was dry, I painted all of the recesses and armor joints with Agrax Earthshade using a very fine detail brush to make all those recesses stand out against the rest of the armor. When I painted Ragnar Blackmane, I didn't think this would have been the way I would go about it. And I didn't know, so I just slathered the entire model in Agrax Earthshade, including the entire of the ammo panels. This didn't ruin it. It made it look incredibly dirty and gritty, and all the recesses were filled, true, but it came out looking really, really bad, and I had to, not bad, just really dirty. And I had to redo all of the armor panels, or the faces, basically with the same color. So I find that this is actually a time-saving method, even though it takes quite a bit of time to find and fill in each of those little lines. The same process of filling in the lines with Agrax Earthshade happens on all of the parts. That includes his backpack, his sword and the bolter arm. And with that all out of the way, I get to start working on the details. My favorite part. And first, a bit of black in all of the joints of the armor that are not metallic or painted with rust gray, the Space Wolf's color. And this is only the beginning. The real part is when we get to highlight all the vents and all the details that I really enjoy painting. Now, usually this is painted with Abaddon black, but uh, I have a large tube of black acrylic paint, and I just pre-mixed a bit with water in a container I had, and that has been in use since I started painting miniatures. It is actually, in my opinion, even better than Abaddon Black, and it's the blackest that I have found that is really good and consistent and has amazing coverage. I simply love it. Too bad I use very little of it. I tried making a handle for the bolter arm from a toothpick. It wasn't very stable. In the end, I ended up holding it by the bolter as much as possible. Unless I was painting the bolter itself, in which case, yeah, it wasn't ideal. I wrapped a bit of double-sided duct tape on that toothpick, and it held up as decently as it could. But yeah, it wasn't always the best. Or I might be confusing the sword arm. Yeah, I think I'm confusing it with the sword arm. This one actually, the toothpick was lodged in there and was really easy to hold. Yeah, the sword arm was the problem. Now, I know the Space Marine isn't very space wolfish, but I was thinking that maybe he has a different backstory, so to speak. He must be one of the new recruits, especially since he's a Primaris. So he hasn't gained a lot of, battle honors or hasn't gotten a chance to optimize his equipment to customize, not optimize, to customize his equipment with all the charms that you would find on a Space Wolves, the little uh, wolf pelts or with wolf charms. So yeah, fortunately, I might have some of those remaining from my um, Grey Hunters and Space Wolf Terminator kits. So maybe if he, proves himself in battle, he might get a few upgrades. I don't understand why the knee pad was easily covered in two simple coats, but when I painted the shoulder pad with Everland Sunset, I had to give it like 3 to 4 coats. I don't get it. It was the same base coat of rust gray. Ah, sometimes it works on the first, sometimes it doesn't. In the end, I found a very good way to hold the sword arm in place. The same double-sided tape, only placed over a cap from a bottle, which I used as a miniature holder, and it really stuck with it, with having the large surface area. So yeah, from now on, if I do have to paint sub-assemblies, this is definitely the way I will go about it. For the parchment, I used a bit of flayed one flesh, and then I washed it with Agrax Earthshade, and for the seal, I used Mephiston Red. Again, followed by a wash of Agrax Earthshade, and then just a tiny little touch of Rune Lord Brass to give it a metallic looking shine to that seal. For the vents of the power pack, I used Lead Belcher. The grates themselves were painted black, but I wanted to highlight them and give them more colors. I find that I want to go at least for a tabletop plus quality. Hopefully I make it. Uh, I will let you be the judge at the end, but I wanted to show off more than just the same color over everything, so that is why I took the time and painted like the muzzles on the exhaust of the power pack. You will see in just a few seconds. And it's my opinion that the muzzles looks absolutely amazing. I mean, the rust gray of the armor combined with the lead belcher specifically for those muscles actually gives the impression that those things can be moved in their sockets. I love my little reverse tweezers. They made painting the backpack such an easy thing to handle. Once I finished with the backpack, I continue with lead belcher over the bolter, and I did the muzzle flash, the stock, and of course the clip, as well as a few fine little details on the slider. Recently, and specifically for painting the Space Marine, I bought that little Dremel head. I don't know exactly what you call it in English, but it's great for putting drill bits and hollow and drilling out the bolter barrel. Now, it's also incredibly good as a miniature holder, especially for uh, toothpicks. Yeah, it's heavy and I can easily hold it in my hand. I just searched Google, it's called a mandrel. Okay, back to the sword. A few of the details were painted with lead belcher, and then I will follow up on the vent with Runelord brass and with black again for the actual grills themselves. Um, you will see why I chose to make the casing black later on, because I wanted the sword to see at least a bit of superficial damage. And to do that, at least he would have used it in, training, since he's a rather new Space Marine. But the reason why I went with black is to create a lot of contrast for what's coming up next. And that would be painting of the teeth with Runefang steel. And then I'm not sure that right now I will be doing it, but soon enough I will also be adding a bit of scratch marks with the same Runefang steel over the casing. These are just incredibly light brush strokes, simulated basically the way the sword would be swung, and whether it hits something or not, the paint might actually be tiny scratches in it. I wanted to add a little bit of even extra more details. Yeah, no, extra more. Anyway, so I touched all the rivets with just a bit of Runefang steel. as I mentioned before, the exhaust was done with Rune Lord brass, and I used the same for the ornament on his vambrace. Followed, of course, like any copper color, by Agrex Earthshade. When I deal with such fine details, I often have to go back and forth with a bit of correcting color. And of course, once in a while, my fingers, because it's instinctive. I don't know. You mess up something, you just put your finger in and rub it, right? This is something I have to work on because it oftentimes damages more than it actually helps. I use the same Rune Lord brass for the chest ornament as well. It really... It should have been a Retributor Gold, but I don't like it. It's a little too bright. And let's not forget, he's a space wolf. Opulence is not their strong suit. It would seem I had previously gotten a little bit ahead of myself. Only now do I paint the seal with Mephiston red, and the same I did for the lenses. For some reason I cut it in editing. You have to understand that I take a few days between editing and recording. It's a long and lengthy process, but it's worth it in the end, at least in my opinion. Though it is quite boring. I realized that the pistol should actually be on a belt, and I left that out, painted in again rust gray, but I think it looks way better with a bit of burnt umber over there. Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned previously, here you can actually see me trying to add those tiny little scratches, scratch marks that ordinary use of this weapon would actually leave on its paint. I hope it comes out looking good. I really do. You'll tell me. Was it worth it? Does it look too much? Did I do too little? I don't know. I realized that one of the other Poltron should have been painted red, so I added the Mephiston red over it, and yeah, that's basically it. Then a few little fixes of where I usually spill over, and so much. So that's done for the bolt alarm. For the base, I dry brushed it 3 times with um, constantly lighter colors, basically just adding white to burnt umber, and of course with again flayed one flesh for the stones, followed by Agrax Earthshade, and then a few little blotches here and there of Agrax Earthshade, or some lighter colors in several spots on the base. And that's it. The base already has a texture. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to add sand to it or anything else like that. And in the end, I think it looks okay. And now we get to the nerve-wracking part of painting sub-assemblies and then assembling them. As you can see, right now I have already chipped the paint while pushing the model into its position, and it will have to, and I will have to add a few retouches here and there, several times actually. But in some cases, I still think it may be worth if you need to get into every nook and cranny, especially for push-it models, which can be easily assembled. I don't think that it's quite so okay to do that for models that need to be glued. And with that, the Space Marine Space Wolf is complete. Now I will let you enjoy the final shots, and if you like the video, please subscribe.